Well, good evening. How's everyone doing? Good. Well, thanks for coming out today. Trying to get blinded by the projector. Before I get started, I wanted to take a quick poll. How many people have used PHPUnit to do any kind of unit testing before? We have about half the crowd. Who in here has also used Selenium, either PHP or any other language? Maybe a quarter or so. Okay, so hopefully it should be a good topic. I like to make my presentations as interactive as possible, so feel free to interject questions as we go. I'll also leave some time for questions at the end. So today's talk, the best investment I've ever made, automated browser testing with Selenium and PHPUnit. And I think by the time I get to the end of the presentation, you'll understand why, after leading a team for 5 years and making countless investments in different technologies, Selenium has again and again and again really proven to be one of the most invaluable for our company. So what I'm going to talk about today, I'm going to give just a little bit of background on PatientCo, as well as a little bit on my background, give a high-level overview of Selenium, what it's used for, why people use it, and some alternatives. Also going to talk about how it works and how easy it is to get started and really step into it. Finally, we'll talk about some more advanced topics in terms of testing in the cloud and how you can start to scale out your Selenium testing as your enterprise grows. And finally, any next steps and questions. So let me talk a little bit about PatientCo, which, as Chris mentioned, is the newest sponsor of the PHP users group. We're very excited. We've got our entire development team. We've got about 6 or 7 developers with a few more on the way. That we've been doing all of our development in PHP for about 5 years now, so we've been pretty actively using PHP and have really been watching, I guess, the users group from the sidelines. So we're really excited now to be able to sponsor it and become a more meaningful part of the group as we go. So PatientCo is a healthcare IT company. We're in the business of helping hospitals and doctors' offices simplify their patient billing. And it'll become apparent in a minute why it's important to have a little bit of this background. But if you've ever received a healthcare bill that you didn't understand, it was confusing, if you weren't sure if your insurance paid, getting a lot of nods, we solved that problem. Both by working with hospitals to simplify the actual bills that go out, but also by providing consumers or patients a really easy consumer-friendly portal to be able to make payments on all their different healthcare-related bills. And that's really where the focus of today's discussion is going to be. A couple of things to note about PatientCo. We like to do things that are easy. Billing, payments processing, and healthcare integrations, basically some of the most complicated IT problems out there. We decided to lob all 3 together. Some of the most regulated industries in terms of HIPAA compliance and PCI compliance. We decided to sign up for a double whammy when we started the company several years back. And again, all of this really forms a foundation for why it's important for us to do a whole lot of testing. We also are hiring seasoned PHP engineers, so if you're interested, be sure to come talk to us. Also, we've got a whole contingent of PatientCo engineers here in the front. You guys can raise your hands, so we know, in the audience as well. So just a quick background on myself. Computer science grad from Georgia Tech. Always wanted to be more on the business side, so I really tried to take more of a product path, but I can't quite seem to get away from the engineering, so giving a pretty technical talk today. Right at PatientCo now, I run both the engineering group and the product group, so really a dual responsibility there. Between Georgia Tech and PatientCo, did spend some time with CareerBuilder.com and helped them internationalize their platform. So again, internationalization is another one of those fun challenges out there. So I like to be a glutton for punishment, I guess, in terms of always working for challenging companies. My fun fact, I always like to give one whenever I talk places. I'm really a travel junkie, international variety. I've been to 25 countries by the time I was 25, and keep going, adding one each year as I get older. So we try to keep up. Luckily, there's plenty of countries to go around. So let me talk a little bit about the challenge. So when we were starting PatientCo a couple of years ago, we had several challenges that we were faced with. We needed to develop a really robust payments platform that was cross-browser compliant. And again, I'll explain a little bit more about why that's so critical in a minute. Always works. It's a payment system. It has to always be up. It has to always calculate things right. It always has to handle billing right. It can't time out. It can't break. There's no such thing as a bug in payment processing. It has to work all the time, every time. And again, that's why testing is so important. And as you can imagine, as a startup in the space, we have very limited resources, both on the development side of things, but also on the QA side. And so we needed to make some really important technical trade-offs to be able to really get a product out the door that was going to be scalable and secure in this highly regulated environments of payments and healthcare. And this is one of the ways we did it. To make matters worse, again, as I mentioned, we do payments processing. And who here has ever worked with payments processing before? So payments processing is one of those fun things. You don't really want to do a lot of the actual card processing yourself. You really want to offload that to someone else whose job is only doing that. They're really good at PCI compliance. And so we don't actually have any of the credit card information come through patient code. What that means, however, is that the client-side logic, all the client-side in terms of input validation, in terms of making sure that credit card numbers are good, in terms of validating payment amounts, all of that has to be done on the client side. So we're a very heavy client-side environment. Lots of hairy JavaScript, and for those of you who have worked with some of the more ancient versions of IE, especially IE 6 and 7, as compared to Chrome and Firefox, they tend to handle JavaScript a little bit differently. Some of the fixed precision math, for example, is handled slightly differently. And again, fixed precision math, when you're doing payments processing, really important. Otherwise, you end up with office space type situations where little fractions of a penny go off into someone else's account, right? So again, lots of challenges in our environment. Also in healthcare, very complicated business rules. You know, I think payroll and lots of other industries have complicated rules, but in healthcare, everything is non-standard. It's a very fragmented environment. And so you're always having to evolve. You're always having to provide very robust systems to integrate with all of these different hospitals. So again, lots of different complexities that tie healthcare and payments together. A good example of our browser usage problem. I see a couple people laughing. So if you look on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see this is the portal that our hospitals use. So that's where the billing staff inside of hospitals come into play. As you can see, and this is actually even recent, 85% of our users are Internet Explorer. I didn't post the breakdown up here, but last time I checked, about 65% of those were IE6 and IE7. So as you can imagine, those are people who pay us to run our system. So not supporting IE6 and IE7, not really an option. So we have to do that, and still have. We finally have been able to phase out IE6. But even IE7, especially some of those JavaScript things, get really wonky. Then you look at the patient side, because a lot of times people will say, well, if we're in an enterprise environment, IT doesn't let all their users upgrade, they've got archaic internet versions, just support only those versions. You know, our application only works with IE6, 7, and 8, and that's it. As you can see over here, though, all of the users, the patients that come to pay bills on the sites use every browser out there. In fact, Firefox is our top browser. So we need to support an incredible number of browsers, and again, because it's payments, it has to work. There's no such thing as rounding problems in the browser. So that's the challenge. So when we were starting, we talked about lots of different things. You know, QA, we knew from the very beginning was going to be a challenge. It just was. There's no way around that. So we started talking about how we build up a manual QA team. I talked to lots of companies around Atlanta and said, you know, how do you do QA? And we looked at, you know, do we offshore it to India or Indonesia or Vietnam, or one of the Asian countries where it's really an established industry to do QA. And we talked to a couple of people here in Atlanta about their experiences, and overall, they weren't so good. So we really priced it out and looked at it and decided that really wasn't a viable option. It just wasn't going to work. Whether we do it here or elsewhere, having manual QA as a major part of our QA process was just not at all feasible. So you look at what's left. So if it's not manual, it has to be automated, right? What else is there? So there's a couple ways to handle automated testing, of course. Unit tests, that's really testing your back-end code. Again, a lot of our back-end logic is complicated, but it's pretty contained. It's pretty easy to test, pretty easy to box up. That's important, but not as much of a challenge as the front end is. Integration testing, most companies that I've talked to here are doing at least some unit testing, maybe some integration testing. There aren't all that many that have really committed to making full-blown front-end browser testing part of their development process. And I think that's a mistake. Whether you are a young startup with just 1 or 2 developers, or a Fortune 500 company with a development team of thousands and QA resources, there's a lot of reasons why making the investment in automated testing is really going to pay off in the long run. So just to give you an overview of the landscape of how are we actually doing testing of patient code. We've really committed to having all critical areas of the site. That's basically anything that a user needs to do to be able to make a payment is going to be fully tested using Selenium. So that's your registration, that's your core build, payment, and processing functions. We wanted to make sure we've got end-to-end coverage of that. Today, our test suite, I pulled some statistics on it this morning. We're sitting right now at about 2,000 tests. Those are individual test functions. Tens of thousands of distinct test cases. And so how do we get from 2,000 to tens of thousands? Well, for each test case we write, or each test function we write, rather, we use what's called a data provider, which is a method of injecting different sets of tests using the same function. So a really basic example, let's say we were testing addition. We could write a test function that says assert that 1 plus 1 equals 2. Or we could variabilize that and say A plus B asserted equal to C, and give it a list of 1 plus 1 equals 2, 1 plus 2 equals 3, 1 plus 3 equals 4, and so on and so forth. So you're getting lots of different combinations and iterations. So in our environment, those iterations aren't so simple as basic addition, but are different conditions. For example, there's a different payment path if you're using an e-check versus using a credit card. There's a different payment path and experience if you're paying the bill in full versus making a partial payment. Whether you're on a payment plan or not, whether the hospital has chosen to give you a discount or not. And the list goes on. There's dozens of different combinations. When you multiply them out, there's thousands of permutations. And so again, rather than ever having a time to manually test that, we've really had to automate that whole process. So run end to end, that whole process takes hours. Literally hours is a full build. And so to give you some concept of how much of an investment we've made, I pulled this as of this morning. Basically, about a third of our entire code base is related to testing. So 1 out of every 3 lines of code, and this is excluding any libraries, so any common libraries we're using, I pulled out. This is actual code that we've written in the last 5 years. And it comes out to about 400,000 lines of code throughout at least the web-facing portion of our application. So it's a fairly significant application. A full third of it is related to tests. So that's the type of investment we've made. So before I go into Selenium and explain exactly how it works, anyone have questions about the set, about some of the complexities that patient code faces? You got a question?
Is this an Ajax application?
So there are parts of the application that are Ajax, the entire application is not. Good question. Any other questions before we go on? Okay. So that's the challenge. That's really what we had to work with. So we looked at a lot of different tools. I'm going to focus today on one that's gained pretty widespread adoption, which is Selenium. Other people pronounce it Selenium. There's lots of different pronunciations. Have your pick. So what is Selenium exactly? So Selenium is a tool that sits on top of PHPUnit. It's invoked by PHPUnit, or the unit testing framework of the language of your choice. It helps you write automated browser tests. So what it does is it simulates an actual user going to your website in the browser you specify and performing actions. So you give it commands like open up Internet Explorer 6, navigate to google.com, find the search box, type in some search term, and make sure that the first result is X, as a basic example. I'll go into exactly some more details on that. One of the core concepts of Selenium is that it really is designed for cross-browser testing. So what that means is you can actually write one test and run in multiple browsers. Kind of a similar concept to Java, a little bit better implementation in terms of write once, run anywhere. In fact, the initial version of Selenium server was actually written in Java in order to accomplish that. Selenium allows you to script and test complex user interactions. So again, very basic things, everything from typing, clicking, double-clicking, all the way up to more complex things such as dragging and dropping, highlighting multiple things and then clicking another button. Imagine testing Gmail, selecting several items and pressing the archive button. That's a pretty complex interaction to script. Selenium lets you do all that. So I'm going to actually show you a video. It's about a minute and a half, and this actually shows an example of what Selenium actually looks like when you're running it. In actuality, you don't actually watch it. When you're running your tests on a daily basis, you're not actually going to watch it. It'll be pretty boring by the 10,000th time you've seen it. And also, I've slowed this way down. I think it's about 200% slower than it is in actuality. Normally, if you have it run at normal speed, you can't even see what's going on. So I'm going to run this video and kind of walk you through what's going on here. So what you can see here, this is our application, okay? I want you guys to keep just an eye on the top right here. Those are all the commands that are getting sent to Selenium. And I'm going to explain some of them in a minute. But essentially what we're doing is we're scripting a login into our system. So we've given it a first name and a last name and a phone number. We want it to register into our no-pay environment. We then want it to go to click the pay button. And you can see even still at slow speed, it still goes pretty quickly. You can see some Ajax here in terms of using an e-check or a credit card. One of the things we do is combine a lot of tests together. So you can see we've actually entered a wrong credit card number, and we're trying to test our front-end validation on the credit card syntax right there. We're also trying some different dates. So you can see sometimes we'll actually go through, input a value, and scroll through. And again, throughout this whole process, not only are we telling the browser, in this case Firefox, to interact, but also we're reading things. If you see here get expression, we're making sure that once we said put it in this text box, we're making sure that we can actually pull it out. So we've got a full testing process there. So again, you can see all sorts of Ajax validation going on. We had things come in and out of the page. We have checkboxes and drop-downs and autocomplete boxes and all sorts of different controls that are being used. And so now what we're going to do is we've actually made the payment. We're going to go onto the receipt page and make sure that all the values we expect to be on that payment receipt page are there. For example, the transaction ID, the payment amount, things like that. And so you can see we actually just invoked this from the command line. We just said PHPUnit, and I only wanted to run a specific test. We let that run in the 2000s. So that's what Selenium looks like. Once you slow it down about 200 times, and actually tell it to be visible instead of just a headless environment. Questions on what we just saw so far? All right.
So we did have one, Jason.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
So are you going to go into more of like how to set up your environment and things like that?
Yes. Yep.
Can I get you to repeat the question?
Yes, so the question was, will I go into how to set up the environment and how to get started with Selenium? And I absolutely will. I just wanted to show you what the end result was. I think it's pretty impressive when you see that, and imagine hours and hours and hours of those scripts going through every different type of combination, all different types of browsers, all that by writing one set of code, which we'll see in a minute. So how does Selenium actually work? So we start with some scripts that we'll actually look at in a second. We actually have to write code that talks about how to interact with Selenium. The second piece is the Selenium server. That's the server that's listening for all of the commands we've issued. That's a server that's sitting there that's basically started up Firefox and says, I'm ready to drive. Tell me what to do. Tell me where to click. Tell me what page to go to. Tell me what information you want me to scrape off the page. That Selenium server is equipped with any number of Selenium drivers, so you can see everything from Chrome to Android to Linux to Opera. All the browsers that are out there, pretty much any browser that's mainstream has a driver. And then, of course, the application. And what's important to note here is things move in both directions. So you can see the red arrows, those are commands that are being driven to the application. Click, drag, navigate to this page. The yellow arrows indicate information that's flowing back from the application. So it's reading what was the transaction ID off of the receipt. It's reading what is the page title. It's reading what URL am I at. Maybe there was some complex redirects that happen, and I want to make sure that they actually work given this particular condition. Maybe I'm trying to test in this particular browser, do I see the right page? You do some conditional redirects based on your browser strength. All of that's possible in Selenium and a whole lot more. So Selenium's evolution, boiled down to one slide, there's basically two phases of Selenium. The first phase was Selenium 1. Remote control, Selenium RC. So if you're Googling the web trying to find information on Selenium, it's important that you look if you're looking at WebDriver or RC, because the two have very similar concepts, but are actually very different in implementation and in the type of functions they support. So it's really important. Just like between PHP 3 and 4, there were major changes. You don't want to use a PHP 3 dot something tutorial on PHP 5 platform. Same thing. You want to make sure that you're looking at the right information. Really, the big differences between Selenium 1 and Selenium 2. Selenium 1 was built basically on JavaScript. It was scripted in JavaScript to all the interactions, so it was pretty limited what you can do. You couldn't upload a file, for example. You couldn't print the page. You couldn't do things that relied on the browser itself as opposed to the DOM model. Selenium 2 then came along, and basically they integrated with the core APIs of Firefox itself, of Internet Explorer. They've really hooked into the underpinnings of the browser themselves, so basically anything that Unit can do, Selenium can do. So there's a huge divide there. Again, also the code base has changed pretty radically. It was, my understanding was it was a pretty complete rewrite. And so, whereas Selenium 1 was largely procedural, object-oriented libraries were really introduced in Selenium 2. So I'm going to walk you through, back to the earlier question, how do you get started? How do you lay your first lines of code? What does Hello World for Selenium actually look like? We have here a very basic Selenium test page. It doesn't have any CSS. It doesn't have anything like that. We want to boil it down to the bare basics. So you look at things like we have a link there, which we're going to utilize. We've got a text box. We've got a comments field. And basically, when you press that send button, it's basically going to just echo those comments back out. Okay, so there's three components that we're going to use as we write our first Selenium test script. There's only 3 pages of this, so it's a pretty basic introduction, but essentially to walk through this code snippet, which we'll post the slides available for everyone to download afterward. The first thing you want to do is set up Selenium. You need to tell the server what version do you want to use. So in this case, we're using Firefox. We want to use Firefox version 15. We want to have it locked down to that, not the default. And we want to use Firefox on Windows 2012. We'll talk a little bit more in a few minutes about how you actually get all of those environments set up. First thing we want to do is tell it what browser we're going to use. We need to tell it what page we want to start at. Now we're going to change that URL throughout as we navigate throughout our application, but we need to know when it starts up, where do you want it to start? So the first test, the most basic one, is called test title. We're using a construct that's built into PHPUnit, a cert contains. We're basically saying, does the title of this web page that I just navigated to contain I am the title? If it does, that test will return true. If not, it'll return false on the line. We can then test a link. And basically all of these tests, anytime you have public function, the word test, and then some camel case name afterward, those are all your test functions. So remember, we said before, we have about 2,000 of those public test functions. In this case, what we're going to do is we're actually going to locate an element on the page. So we're going to locate that link. We're going to locate that link by its div ID or by its link ID. And we're going to click on it. So again, remember that two-way interaction. We're telling Selenium, find this element on the page. Give me back context to it so I can do something with it. In this case, I want to click it. Once we click that link, we're going to navigate to the second page, and then we're going to make sure that that page says, I'm another title page, just to make sure, again, that we got to the right place. Final one here, we're going to get a little bit more complex. Again, we're going to locate an element on the page by its ID. So in this case, the HTML has I'm a text box as its ID. You can also use things like XPaths, you can use names, there's a whole list of different locator strategies. You can also select multiple elements at once. For example, all checkboxes on a page, all checkboxes on a page that meet this regular expression, things like that. The fourth button down. There's a lot of different locator strategies you can use to actually find a specific item on the page. Once we found it, we want to click, and then we want to do keys. Keys is actually simulates someone pressing keys on their keyboard. Again, Selenium gives you very fine-grained control over the browser. And so, in this case, we're actually simulating individual key presses. So we're going to type, this is some text, one character at a time. As opposed to another method we'll see later, which just throws the whole text in there right at once. Anyone know why that's important to differentiate between individual key presses and just throwing the whole text in at once? Anyone have any ideas? What's that?
Testing autocomplete?
Testing autocomplete, that's a great example. So anything that relies, an input mask, autocomplete, anything that relies on individual character events needing to take place. So again, Selenium's got hundreds of different methods, and they allow you to be as fine-grained as you want about it, or just very general. It just depends on your use case. And then again, we're basically typing in everything into the text box, and we're making sure that at the end, does it so equal what I put in there. And if you don't have any fancy JavaScript or anything else going on, there's really no reason why it wouldn't equal that. If you had some autocomplete functionality, an input mask, something like that, it might have actually changed, and that's why you want to actually capture the value to make sure that nothing's changed. Any questions so far in terms of how to get started with very basic Selenium and PHPUnit test functions?
Can Selenium simulate typos?
So the question was, can Selenium simulate typos? And the answer is absolutely. Selenium's going to type whatever you type in. So you could, for example, have a function that takes in a string, switches a character, returns it, and then puts that in the text box and sees, for example, just like Gmail does it give you a list of autocorrect suggestions. So again, anything you could do, if you were to hire someone to sit at a terminal and manually QA something, if you gave them instructions in a test script and said, instead of typing Google, Google, type it Googol, they can do that, right? Another question in the back.
How about like simulating pressing backspace or pressing enter?
So the question was, how do you simulate special character classes like backspace, enter, spacebar, things like that? Selenium actually lets you use character control. They have a list of all those different characters, and so you'd actually give it a specific list of characters to put in there, kind of corresponding to the ASCII value of those different things. And again, that's all on the website. You can find it. And the behavior of that's going to vary depending what type of function you're using. For example, individual key presses, you can use special character controls like that. If you're just saying put the entire text block into a text box all at the same time, those aren't necessarily going to work as you think they might, so you've got to be careful there. They also have some special functions dedicated to specific functions like back in the browser, things like that, or adding a control key, a shift key, something like that.
So you're targeting PHPUnit right now, but what other scripting language can you write tests in?
So the question was, besides PHPUnit, what other languages can you use to write Selenium functions in? Basically, anything that Selenium has support for, which is all major languages, so Ruby, PHP, .NET, Java, Python. Again, if it's a mainstream language, it likely has a driver built in for it. The reason why it's so easy to do that is because Selenium server operates on a JSON protocol, and so every command, send these keys, it'll have, the structure is roughly action, send keys, parameter, whatever payload you're giving it. And so again, it's really just a JSON protocol back and forth, and so the implementations are pretty easy.
Those HTTP requests?
There are HTTP requests. For what it's worth, you can, if you want, write your Selenium tests in another language besides your application. That's actually something we thought about. For example, would it be easier to write it in Python, even though we're PHP on our backend? And there are pros and cons to it, but certainly if you have a Java application or a .NET application that might need to be compiled, you might want to use a scripting language that you can easily change. It's really up to you. Because again, all it's doing is interacting with the browser. So what you use to write your Selenium tests in has nothing to do necessarily with what your backend is. There are some benefits, though, to using the same language. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but some of the steps to set up your tests might involve injecting data into the database. For example, if you're simulating a user login, if you're starting with an empty database, which you know, by good practice you should, you start with an empty users database right before you try to test the login information, the username and password. You have to inject that into your database. And so we find that we share a tremendous amount of code between our application and backend tests. So there's definitely some benefit to doing that. But again, it really depends on your use case. Any other questions before I move on? Yes?
I'm sorry if I spaced that. Which wrapper library do you use to make those JSON calls?
So the question was, which wrapper library do you use to make those JSON calls? What he's referring to, there's actually a lot of different wrapper libraries out there for different languages, even for PHP. Google's released one, Facebook's released one. These particular examples, I'm using one that's provided by Sauce Labs. They actually have one that, I don't know if it's based on Google or Facebook's, but it's a fairly well utilized one. And again, there are slight nuances between it, so just make sure you stick with it once you choose a particular wrapper. So the final test we're going to look at, again, remember, as I said before, the functionality, if you put a comment in there and press the send button, it's going to echo back out that comment after being submitted. So let's test to see if that functionality actually works. So we're going to start just by defining what comment we're actually going to use. We're going to find our comments box by its ID. You'll notice in the last example, we actually stored a context to that, as opposed to just chaining the calls together. You can do it either way. In this case, we're just putting the entire value there at once. We're not simulating individual key presses. We're just shoving it all in there. Then we're finding the submit button and pressing the submit. From there, what we're doing is we're defining a very basic closure that checks to see does the comment equal what we expect it to. All we're doing is we're saying find the your comments div in this case, grab its text. So again, we're reading that text off the page. This is after we've submitted it, and it's connected back out to us, and it's going to return whatever text we get with the addition of your comments. The final thing we're going to do is something called spin assert. Now that is based on the Selenium library. Spin assert, what it's going to do is that it's accounting for the fact that we're operating in a web environment. Right? Things don't happen instantly. When you submit a payment to a payment processor, it's going to take some number of microseconds, milliseconds, seconds even to come back. Even just clicking the submit button, even if it's almost instant, there's still some time. If you don't use something like spin assert, what it's going to do is it's going to say submit, and then immediately it's going to say, has my text been echoed? Well, guess what? The page hasn't even loaded yet. There's no way the text could exist there because the page hasn't loaded. So what spin assert is going to do is it's going to try every second to see if that element ever exists. So after we press the submit button, every second we're going to say, does this text exist? Does this text exist? Does this text exist? And of course, you can control the duration of the pause. By default, I believe it's 1 second. You can make it shorter, you can make it longer. So for example, our payment processing tests, we know take just over a second. So we started off with 2 seconds. You can also tell it what the maximum timeout value is. In other words, if you didn't give it, if you let it run forever, let's say that the page was broken, you'd just be constantly checking your test would never come back. I don't actually know offhand what the default is. I think it's usually in the 10 or 20 second range. But again, that's all controllable through parameters. Any questions on that second code snippet?
More general, I see you're getting a lot of stuff by ID. Do you find that to be pretty reliable versus getting it by the other methods that are maybe fragile?
Yep, so the question was, in terms of a locator strategy, is using the by ID generally a good practice? I'd say it really depends on your application. It also depends if it's an application you control. In other words, we're testing our own application. If you're testing another application, you might have to use some other strategies. I'd say whenever you can use by ID, that's always best because by definition there should only be one element with that ID on it, whereas XPaths tend to be really, really fragile. You change the page a little bit, all of a sudden it doesn't work anymore. So that is something you need to pay pretty close attention to. Again, anytime you can, and often we do, give something a specific ID, it makes it easier to use. Sometimes you don't have that luxury because you're testing a page, it just doesn't have IDs for you. It also doesn't work. A lot of times we have multiple checkboxes on the page. You might need to iterate through those, something like that, or use an XPath with the @ symbol, which is going to give you back anything that matches that address. Other questions?
Have you ever used XPath to test the page structure?
Say that again?
Have you ever used XPath to test page structure? So if you really want that div, inside of span, inside of div, inside of span.
Yeah, so the question is, have I ever used Selenium with XPath to test the page structure itself? I'd say probably there are examples. I can't think of many. I know you certainly can. There's no reason you can't, because you can say, is the third link X? And actually, that's not true. So I'd say we do that. For example, our application has an administrative area. And so if you're an admin, you have extra buttons that show up on your header. We would use it in a case like that, just to make sure if admin's true, you have the buttons. But in terms of really testing deep into the page, that tends to be a little tougher. It's, again, really only because it's so fragile. There's nothing technically stopping you from doing it. All right. So how do you actually write this, right? So we walked through an example of what it looks like when it's done. That's a nice example you copy and paste. But you have your own applications. They're totally different structures. They may or may not have IDs that are easy to use for locator. How do you get started? So it turns out that as part of Selenium 1 RC, someone developed, I think out of Japan actually, someone developed a Firefox plugin called Selenium IDE. And that was basically a plugin that sat on top of Firefox and allowed you to click around different things, and it would record all your actions for you. So it would record what button you clicked on, it would record what text you typed in, it would record what pages you went to, and essentially you could export it. So for Selenium 2 came along, and that tended to work okay, but not great. And so a company whose business it is to be in the Selenium business, Sauce Labs, created Selenium Builder. Selenium Builder works just like the diagram shows you. Really, you can choose if you're going to be using the Selenium 1 or Selenium 2. You can click through. Again, it's only Firefox only, so you have to write, if you're going to use it, you have to write your tests in Firefox. You can run them in any browser. You need to write them in Firefox if you're going to use their plugin. And you can export the scripts and run on Sauce, which is, we'll talk about in a minute, or run locally. So that's a good tool when you're getting started, rather than just staring at a blank screen and saying, well, where do I even start? The best thing to do is think, what do I need to test in my application? Fire up Selenium Builder, which is completely free. Start clicking around, clicking through, and it'll at least give you the framework. For very, very basic tests, that might be all you need. If it's just a really simple interaction, with only a couple of pages, there's no really advanced interactions, there's not much variable data, you might be done. Most times, and especially in our case, we actually need to take those results that we've used as a base and tweak the code. And what are we doing? We're doing a couple different things. The first, we're refactoring a lot of your common functionality. So think about, in most of our tests, you need to be logged into our environment to start the test. So we've abstracted away the login piece, because for login, you want to make sure you're on the right page. You want to make sure that the username text box exists, that the password text box exists, that the text box actually is a password control and not just plain text. And then you want to put your inputs in, make sure that they come back okay, and press submit. So just even something as simple as logging in might require 50, 60 lines of code in terms of being really detailed in terms of your certs. So we don't want to have that functionality spread across our application. So we're going to abstract that into a login helper and put that in one place in our application. We also might want to add data providers. Again, data providers is a concept that allows you to write one test case, pass in an array of different variables to test with, or different items to test with, and it's going to run through your test function once for each. So let's say we wanted to try logging in as 3 or 4 different people. We'd give a list of all the user credentials in an array that would just loop through those one by one. Also, Selenium Test Builder is not going to give you a lot of assertions. If you really want to be strict about it, and in our environment we need to be, we have assertions everywhere. Make sure we're constantly making sure, are we on the right page? Are we on the right place in the page? Is this text box what we expect? Was it pre-filled? Was it not pre-filled? So on and so forth. And so to get really good test coverage beyond just the very basics, you're going to want to add a lot of those assertions in. And again, that's just your basic PHPUnit assertions. Assert true, assert false, assert contains, assert equals, not equals, things like that. So that's how you get started with Selenium at a very basic level. And what you'll find is after you've been testing the application for a while, you actually have most of the code you need. So you're not finding yourself constantly having to reinvent the wheel in terms of locators and things like that. You just might be changing the path you take through the application, but your core components are always there. So before I move to talking about how testing in the cloud works, any other questions about how you get started writing Selenium tests? All right. So testing in the cloud, this is actually what makes Selenium, I think, the most exciting. For us being in a cross-browser world, this is really what provides a ton of value. Testing locally, and we run, you can on your local machine, Windows, Mac, Linux, etc. You can actually run Selenium server, and as long as you have the right browser installed, you can run the tests. But what happens when you want to test on all different browser versions? We need to test in i6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We need to test also in Firefox. We need to test all those browsers in Windows XP, in Windows 2000, in Windows Server 2012, and so on and so forth. The combinations get bigger and bigger and bigger. So some companies run basically a big bank of virtual machines that have all these browser and OS combinations configured. And it quickly gets out of hand because you start with 5 and then you realize you need 10. They're really hard to maintain, they're never updated, they're always in a weird state. Maybe the last test failed midway through, so it's got some remnants or garbage or cookies, things like that. Very, very expensive and hard to maintain. Highly recommend against that. Well, I do recommend there's a couple companies out there, probably the industry leader though is Sauce Labs. They maintain an array of browser and OS combinations. They also offer a lot of other functionality not available on your local machine. For example, manual test sessions. So let's say that we get in our customer service center, someone call up and say, this button's not working. We're like, how's it not working? And they're like, oh, I'm using i6. So we look in our web log and see you're in i6. You can actually quickly go into saucelabs.com, say, I want Internet Explorer 6 on Windows XP, and in about 15 seconds, you'll be looking at a clickable terminal, kind of like VNC almost, in your web browser. Not only can you use that to explore any website you can get to on the web, you can also set up a tunnel to allow you to test applications behind the firewall. You can also record the sessions, both video and screenshots. So imagine your QA team going through, again, no programming for this is a manual operation, then going through, clicking around, reproducing that user's issue, and clicking the track button, and then you can also add that to your ticketing system. So again, our developers aren't having to spend a whole lot of time reproducing, they can quickly see, yep, and exactly 59 seconds in, here's exactly what happened, and here's a screenshot. And again, we have access to basically any modern browser out there on basically any OS. They also have mobile testing, so that's been released, I think, in the last 9 months or so. Android and iOS has pretty good support. We have not used those yet, so I don't know a whole lot about those other than to know Sauce Labs has really been promoting those. So how is it different when you're testing in the cloud with someone like Sauce Labs? There's only a couple things that change. If you remember our earlier diagram, we said you have your script, you have the Selenium server that's running on your local machine. It's got whatever drivers you have support for and your application. So really the only things that change here are these two middle components moved to the cloud. There's a software as a service company, Sauce Labs, that provides Selenium testing infrastructure as a service. So again, you still write the same code that you ran locally. It works in both places. It uses the same JSON protocol to communicate, so you can swap them in and out. You still have your test app. The only thing that they've done is they've provided all this infrastructure for you on demand. So here's just one example. Just for Windows 7, here's all the browsers they offer. So it looks like Firefox 3 through 25, the last 6 or 7 versions of Chrome, i8, 9, 10, Opera, and Safari. And that's just for one OS. So I think they have, right there. So they have 236 different combinations. And again, that's offering all your different browser choices on all the different OSs on which they're available. So really, question?
How expensive is it?
How expensive is it? I don't have any affiliation with them, so we can bring up the page. Basically, you pay for a package of minutes that are used for testing. So it really depends. For us as a payments processing company, it's our business to be right every time. So compare this to maintaining an array of virtual machines, and it's pennies to the dollar. Compare this to employing a group even in a low-cost country in Asia to click around all day, and there's no comparison. So, you can get started, I think, as low as about $40 a month, and that gives you a bucket of minutes if you're an individual developer. You can get pretty pricey, though, if you're running your application on every version. So what a lot of companies do is they'll run locally, they'll run every commit against some base version, maybe Firefox, just on a local machine. And then once a day or at every major release, they'll run it against all browsers. So you're not necessarily using this in the continuous integration environment to test every browser, every single commit. That would be prohibitively expensive. There's another question.
So, is there a cost associated with any of the other tools?
No, so all the other tools are free. So Selenium is open source, you can download it. The Selenium server that you run locally is free. And again, that'll work with whatever browsers are on your system. All of the wrappers, which the gentleman in the back was asking about before from Google and Facebook, all open source, it's all on GitHub. So really easy to get started. I'll have a link to it later, but Sauce Labs has a really good getting started tutorial. Whether you're going to use Sauce Labs or not doesn't make any difference. All the same content applies. And essentially, it's a pick your own adventure. You pick what language you want to get started with, what types of things you're going to do, and it walks you right through it. So really good resource. Here is the commercial for Sauce Labs. So they are giving away to one person a free account to be able to really try it out. Sauce Labs does have a free version, I believe. It has, I think, maybe 100 minutes a month, something like that. So you can actually get started for free and try it. But do we want to do that drawing now, or do we want to wait till the end?
We'll do it here.
Okay, we'll do that at the end, so we'll come back to it. We're almost done. So that's really the extent of the technical content. I'm going to give just, I have only one or two slides left. I want to talk about some best practices for implementing Selenium and PHPUnit testing into your culture, because that's one of the toughest things. You often get people who push back and say, I don't have time for testing, right? It's too expensive. When am I going to find time? So how do you overcome that? Well, here's a couple tricks. So first, start small. It's like exercising. I'm horrible about going to the gym, but I'm always told, just go to the gym, even if you don't do anything, just go there for 5 minutes. By the time you get there, it's highly likely you'll do something beneficial. Same thing in Selenium. Get the framework going. Even if it's as simple as loading your application's homepage and testing that the title is there, just do it. Because then when you have 5 or 10 minutes another day, you go in and add a few more lines. Really easy to get started that framework. Just do it so you have it. And run that as part of your testing. For the people who say, I don't have time to test, so there's a little trick in terms of getting testing time. A lot of people look at testing as a separate activity from development. You can't do that. You can't have a ticket in your system that says, write code, and then another ticket that references that and says, write tests for said code, and then another ticket that says, write Selenium tests for said code and test on all browsers. Because some project manager, whoever's managing your queue, is going to come by and say, look, we're running behind, testing's the first thing out the door. If you put testing as a step in the development ticket, the ticket's not done until the tests are written for it. Think about that for a second. That's a paradigm shift, but I've seen it work in so many different companies out there. A lot of people have written about this on their blog. One of the steps in our ticketing process is test development. All of our developers know, they're here, they'll tell you, they know that a ticket is not done until it has appropriate test coverage. And depending on the impact of the change, if it's a text change, do you need a full-blown Selenium test? Probably not. If you're rewriting the guts of our payment application or changing the JavaScript, probably pretty important to test that. So again, you need to use test coverage that's appropriate to the type of change. But again, don't send a ticket for code review until you've written a test for it. Because that's the very first thing that's going to happen in code review. is a developer who's looking at that. And by the way, all of our code at patient code goes through code review, even if it's just a quick glance. It's going to get right back to you. So again, make testing a step in a ticket, not a separate ticket. That will get you a lot of wins. Keep an eye on the long-running tests. If you're not careful, you can end up with, it's like the 80-20 rule, right? 20% of your tests are going to take 80% of the time to run. So you want to keep your test time down. That way you can run through them more often. One thing to do is consolidate tests. So you saw before in that payment page, a video I showed, not only were we testing the full payment process, but we were also testing some of the credit card validation there. So we basically inserted a few extra seconds of random tests in there so that we didn't have to have one full setup, which was log into the system, go through, find the bill pay page, do all this credit card stuff and shut down, and then another one, go through, make a successful payment all the way through. You don't want to do that because the setup time to log in the different pages is going to take a while. You want to combine as much as you can at once. Finally, track which areas of the application are under test coverage. Pick the most critical path. So for us, we didn't say every single part of our application is going to be tested. We said the critical ones are. Payment processing always has to work on every supported browser every time. It has to be Selenium tested. Things like, for example, we have a secure messaging functionality. We have some very basic tests around, but it's not as extensive, right? It doesn't need to have the same level of scrutiny as our underlying payment system does. So what's next? Where do you go to learn more? Where do you go to get started? So the official documentations are at seleniumheadquarters.org. They have a pretty good getting started guide. I've found recently in the last couple of months, Sauce Labs, their business to make it easy to get more developers using it. So you can imagine they've invested quite a bit in evangelists, things like that. Saucelabs.com, they're adding stuff all the time. I'm amazed. It's a great company out of San Francisco. Again, I have no affiliation with them, just a happy customer. And really go test something. That's how easy it is to get started. Just test something. The last thing I'll mention, I'm not going to go into it. I actually did a tech talk at Georgia Tech a couple of months ago that was kind of more geared towards a hacking mentality as opposed to testing. It's a little bit drier of a subject, but I did the top 7 crazy uses of Selenium. So basically, how can you build applications on top of web apps? So think about screen scraping, think about other types of really complex interactions. So think about Ticketmaster. You need to go through and purchase a ticket right when it comes out. You could choose to use a bunch of Perl calls and it gets pretty nasty to parse through that. Or you could use Selenium to click through. Things like that. Also, you can run it in different browsers. So there's a lot of fun you can have with that. Because again, remember, it's basically you're simulating a human, so anything a human can do, Selenium can do. So it's got a lot of other creative uses really up to. This is a really cool XKCD comic that I'm going to end on. It's probably a little bit small in the back, but the idea that kind of started it all was, of course, the XKCD folks wanted to set up a script to pick random items under $1 on eBay and have them shipped to themselves every day. That's something you could pretty easily automate in Selenium just by going to the eBay search advanced page. And actually at the Georgia Tech Talk, we actually built something like this. So it was pretty fun. So that is Selenium, one of the best investments I've ever made. What questions can I answer?
Is there anything that you're doing this that's particularly hard to simulate or do? Like, what's the difficult things that we're not thinking about in the first few minutes of the program?
So I'd say if your application is really Ajax heavy, for example, testing Gmail would be pretty tough because you can do a lot of really complicated things in Gmail. You can select multiple items, then go and star things, then do a search on it or a filter, then drag them all to a label. Things like that tend to be complicated to get right. Our application does use Ajax for validation and things like that, but there's no like dragging and dropping, file uploads, printing, anything that's not kind of a core interaction can be a little bit more difficult. Again, I don't have tons of experience doing that because our application is fairly straightforward. I'd say, as someone mentioned before, I think one of the hardest parts of Selenium is getting the timing right. Anytime you have latency, things like that, you get false positives. So just making sure you're building resilient tests and making sure that you're using a good locator strategy. Again, if your XPath is this long, it's probably going to break. So you've got to find some way to shorten that, and there are tools out there that you can use that will help you shorten it and abbreviate it.
Do you have any sense of how well it would work in the responsibly designed applications, or one that scales to desktop, tablet, and mobile?
Yep, so the question was, how does Selenium work to be able to test a responsive application, maybe one that has different widths and things like that, or different aspect ratios for different devices like a tablet. We don't do a whole lot of responsive testing on our site. I think that you probably could do it. I don't know. Anyone in the audience have experience testing responsive sites automatically? It's an advanced topic. It's a good question, though. I don't have a great answer, not a lot of experience, but I can't imagine why you couldn't, because again, anything you can do, even resizing the browser is really easy to do in Selenium. So you could, try it this width and make sure that the menu icon changes to one without text, for example. You just need to do that. Make sure that the image source is changed. You can certainly do that.
Will Selenium give you those metrics back in terms of where something might be on the screen? So, for example, if you did do a test of a browser read width, that you know that your button is predictably where it's supposed to be, or a margin.
You're saying, will it give you? So the question was, will it give you the XY coordinates of an element, something like that?
Yeah.
I actually don't know. That's not something we've ever tried. I'm not sure. Yeah, I know you can read. You can read an awful lot about the properties of an element or an object. I'm just not sure if that one in particular works.
If it's running headless, can you have it take a screenshot to use a certain one?
Yes, good question. So the question was if it's running headless. And so the difference between headless and non-headless is what we saw today was non-headless. We could actually see the browser and all the interactions. Typically, other than when you're developing it, you run it in headless mode, which basically uses a virtual display to have all those Xbar windows and everything else. That way you don't have to actually see it or consume your screen. And so the question was, can you take a screenshot when you're in headless mode? And the answer is absolutely yes, you can. So you can actually define, at any point in time, take a screenshot here. We've actually thought about using Selenium for our marketing people like to have a constantly updated PowerPoint deck of some key screenshots in the application. And it's a real pain in the neck to maintain because every time you change the application, you got to go through and retake all the screenshots and maybe the demo data changes. So we haven't done it yet, but we've toyed with the idea of actually defining a basic Selenium script that will navigate between pages and just periodically snap the screenshots. And so anytime marketing needs an updated PowerPoint deck, we'll just run the script and say, hey, it's on the network drive, we'll find it.
So in headless mode, do all the browsers actually get packaged with Selenium code, or do you have to have, let's say, if you want to run or test in 4 different versions of IE, do you actually have to have 4 separate machines with the different versions of IE installed in order to make that happen?
Yeah, so the question was in headless mode, or I think in any mode, do you have to have the actual browsers installed on your local system to be able to test with them? And the answer, unfortunately, is yes. Because again, it's going through and simulating. So if you want to test the 4 different versions of Internet Explorer, you would need to have all 4 versions of Internet Explorer available. And again, that's why systems or platforms like Sauce Lab are so great, because you can just say, I want to test in IE 6, 7, 8, 9. And for what it's worth, you can also run them in parallel on the cloud, so it's a lot faster.
Is there any aggregation of test results, like you're running those different tests or something like that? How are you looking at the results?
So the test results are really PHPUnit results, and so anything that PHPUnit will report back to you is what your test results are, and so you can typically output them in a JUnit format. You can output them in XML, but again, that really boils down more to a PHPUnit issue than a Selenium issue.
Try tying it in with code coverage reports or anything like that.
Yep, you can definitely tie it with code coverage. Now again, remember, it's going to be pretty tough to tie that this, if you're in an MVC framework, that this view is accessed by this Selenium, because they're not inherently tied together. So that might be tough, but in terms of your back-end code coverage, absolutely. Again, anything you can do in PHPUnit, you can do it and more in Selenium.
How difficult is it to go from a local test to the cloud?
Very easy because both the local Selenium server and the Sauce Labs server support the exact same protocols. Sauce Labs supports Selenium 1, Selenium 2, they're backwards compatible, but not forwards compatible. And also, it's really just changing one of the parameters you set is what's the URL of the server. And so, by default, it's localhost port, I think it's 8044 or 4044, something like that. You just change out the Sauce Labs port. They give you an API key and a password, of course, as well. But very, very simple. That's one of the nice things is you can write all your tests, run locally, and then if you're ready to move to the cloud, you certainly can. And again, I think Sauce Labs has a small bit of functionality on top of Selenium. For example, they have a platform. Normally, the platform tab, which we talked about much earlier, was that's something that's more Sauce specific. Because again, whatever platform you're on is what you're going to have access to. So something like that would only apply if you're in a Sauce environment. But again, because it's JSON, it's just going to ignore it if you're running locally. Any other questions?
Once, twice.